Hi guys, it's Debbie, and unfortunately today I'm here to speak about 50 Shades Darker. Yes, I saw it, but I did it for you guys. I did it so you wouldn't have to suffer and watch it. There will probably be spoilers in this video, and in these situations I would normally recommend watching the film before seeing the video, but in this case it really doesn't matter. It's really not worth watching it. Now, 50 Shades Darker is the second film in the 50 Shades trilogy, a movie saga based on 3 novels of the same name written by E.L. James. They are books which we could somehow place in the erotic novel category, and they are mainly targeted at a female audience. Now, if the books had remained simple erotic novels, that would have been absolutely fine. Now, the problem is that their plot is so weak that you could hardly get a 10-minute porn movie out of them, let alone a blockbuster trilogy which amounts to over 6 hours of footage. But they somehow managed to do it. Directors Sam Taylor Johnson and James Foley somehow managed to paste together scenes from a non-existent plot and create one of the most cringy film sagas ever, where we would all immediately assume that nobody actually went to see 50 Shades of Grey given the circumstances, and it was a box office flop. No, on the contrary, it earned $571 million, nearly $600 million, only 100 below Interstellar, which is one of my favourite films. $571 million. Let's just let that sink in. Okay, so one option would have been just accepting our fate when 50 Shades of Grey earned all that money, and we could have hoped with all that revenue the creators of the trilogy aimed at something slightly better for 50 Shades Darker with such a budget. But no. Quick recap of the first film. Anastasia Steele is a young woman which lives a shy and reserved life and has little to none sexual experience. A series of events brings her to meet Christian Grey, a ridiculously rich businessman. Mr. Grey has suffered a childhood of abuse and abandonment, which supposedly led him to not being able to love anybody and not have what society would define a conventional relationship. On the contrary, Mr. Grey can only have a relationship with a woman after signing a contract with her. With this contract, the woman agrees to be passive and submissive to a dominant Christian, which is in charge of deciding everything about her life, from what she eats to what she wears to how she behaves to how she refers to him. Also, Christian's traumatic past led him to avoid what he calls plain vanilla sex, and he prefers BDSM practices. As a matter of fact, the contract he signs with the woman also includes a strict list of rules about their sexual relationship. We can all predict how this will end up. Anastasia is tempted by Christian's looks and power and sexual interests, and Christian is tempted by Anastasia's innocence and realises that he may be able to have a real relationship with her without signing a contract, as he starts to have feelings towards her. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the first film, so 50 Shades of Grey, ends with an upset Anastasia which couldn't manage to accept Christian's dominating attitude, which he could hardly keep under control. So the second installment in this trilogy, 50 Shades Darker, opens with a depressed Anastasia which is trying to not think about Christian, all of this while the lyrics to The Scientist by Coldplay play in the background. Anastasia and Christian soon get back together without discussing or solving the problems of their past, because as this series again proves, sex is always the best solution to relationship issues. But wait a minute, Anastasia actually summons the courage to tell Christian that she doesn't like his dominating attitude and wants to know more about his past. What a plot twist! Christian's answer to all of this is screaming and swearing at her, forbidding her to leave on a business trip and ignoring all her questions about his past. But hey, he makes up to all of this with great sex, expensive gifts, and eventually a marriage proposal. But that's it. But that's the plot. There's nothing more to this. It's just Christian and Anastasia fighting, having sex to make up for the damage, and then discussing again. At one point in the film, I'd actually lost track of everything that was going on, and I was wondering if there would actually be a meaning to all of this, if there would be a plot, a story at some point, but there just isn't. The only remotely interesting moments in the film were very few. For example, the scene in which Anastasia's boss tries to sexually assault her, and this is a terrible fact, but if you look closely, it was only inserted to then introduce again alpha man macho Christian. I think this film tried to bring on screen an erotic topic but without becoming a full-blown porno, so limiting the sex scenes scenes and trying to build something more or less interesting around them. So sort of bridge between something erotic but also meaningful. But it didn't manage to achieve this, not even with nearly $600 million. There were some points in the film in which certain important topics were touched. For example, love versus submission, the concept of working to keep the mind occupied, jealousy, dominance, childhood traumas, but these were just very brief moments in nearly 2 hours of ridiculous staring and lip biting. Also, again, we are glorifying a relationship in which Christian is abusive towards Anastasia. He is constantly infuriated by her attitude. It is a relationship in which Anastasia is asked to stay at home, not work, and generally not take any decision about her life. Yes, of course, every now and again she answers back to Christian and she says she is afraid of his behaviour, but she doesn't actually really stand up for herself and just prefers to have sex with him because this seems to calm both of them down. It seems to solve their problems. Okay, so I understand that the film tries to aim to the concept of being dominated by another person, the sexual idea of being submissive. And also I believe that anybody is free to express their own feelings in the way they consider best for themselves, whether in their sexual life or in their everyday life, whether with no sex, with no relationships, or with a lot of love and romance, or with consensual dominance and submission practices. I'm not judging the sex in the film, I'm judging it for being 2 hours of a vast void filled with childish dialogue, an inconsistent plot, and terrible acting based just on staring. I was also upset by the contradictory soundtrack, starting with Scientist by Coldplay and then with Love You Should Have Come Over by Jeff Buckley, one of the most profound and meaningful love songs that there is, played in the background while Anastasia again pleases spoilt Christian. I think the one time in which Anastasia actually stands up to Christian and answers back to him is when he orders a meal for her at the restaurant and she realises she has a brain and can order her own meal, and poor Christian is taken so back that he then has to fuss over minor inconveniences. For example, the waiter doing too much noise while unscrewing the unnecessarily posh bottle of wine. He is constantly upset, furious, and taking out his anger on Anastasia. Okay, I understand that his anger and his inability to feel safe, to feel at his ease in the arms of a woman is due to the traumas in his childhood, but why not analyse this aspect? Why not develop Christian's character, give us some more information about his situation? Okay, let's just suppose for one moment the fact that the film didn't actually want to convey a meaningful plot, but just wanted to give the erotic side of the story. I have to admit that this second film is much less innocent than the first film, and we have some pretty explicit sex scenes, but everything is forced and fake. There is no chemistry between the two actors. I also think that Dakota Johnson and Jamie Dornan didn't manage at all to represent the characters they should have been portraying, so it failed even in this. It's just a cringy failed attempt at something more kinky. Now, the night before seeing 50 Shades Darker, I actually watched The Devil's Advocate on TV, one of my favourite films, and I'm speaking of it because although the two films have a completely different plot, they speak of completely different topics, they're a completely different genre. In The Devil's Advocate, we have a lot of erotic scenes, some of which even more depraved than the ones in the 50 Shades trilogy, and although it is completely different, it still managed to convey a meaningful plot and also give a meaning to the sex scenes, because we have the topics of spirituality, religion, jealousy, dominance. 50 Shades Darker, on the contrary, was so desperate that in one scene it actually tried to make green peppers appear sexual. And I shall end this video with this fun fact and invite you to subscribe to the channel for many more movie related videos. See you soon in your video, bye!